Welcome to Mallett and Michelle on Dripping Springs, hosted by me, Michelle Lewis, and Steve Mallett. You know, Steve, busy doesn't quite describe us until you decide to take a vacation.
I'm going on vacation. I'm going on vacation.
Yeah.
And nothing you can do about it.
No, there's nothing I can. Oh, I can do something about it.
Yeah. And Michelle Lewis, who can multitask like those plate spinners in the circus.
Oh, that is my life lately. My goodness.
You have like 27 little things floating around up there, little spinning plates. I don't know how you do it.
I know. Well, this wedding is taking up a big part of my brain right now, which it should. It's my daughter's wedding, so it's taken up a lot.
And I, on the other hand,
are taking up the other 95% of that.
Yeah, but I'm not a multitasker. I learned a long time ago, I can focus on one task at a time. How many times do you come to me at my desk and you start telling me something and then 30 seconds in I go, wait, start again, because I wasn't listening the first 30 seconds.
You're talking too fast. You're talking. I think that's a man thing. I think I think it's a gender thing.
I have often thought that. I think it's because women, when you're around kids, you have to be doing 2 or 3 things, right? One's sticking their hand in the light socket. One needs some food. One's dropping something off. You know, and I'll say this, and it's probably going to make you cringe a little bit. Probably.
But I could be on the toilet brushing my teeth, breastfeeding a baby while cooking dinner.
I'm sure you could. And me, I'm like, no, I'm mowing the lawn, and that's it. Nothing else is going on. Is it hot enough out there for you right now?
It is a little hot. We've been getting a couple of little rain showers, which have been kind of nice.
Yeah.
Little bursts of rain.
Every one of them has just split, gone right around my house. I have not had a drop at my house. But I was thinking about ways. We're spoiled now. What do you set your air conditioning at?
I'm gonna get turned in.
You're gonna get people are gonna get mad at you.
What is it? ERCOT? Or how do you say it?
ERCOT is. I think they were recommended you keep it at like 80 degrees. I'm like, no.
I declined to answer on fear I will self-incriminate myself. 68 degrees.
Do you really?
At
68
at night, and then the fan. Also, I freeze
we do
out.
the fan. We do 71 until we fall asleep, and then the Nest bumps it up to 74 or something. But you think about how it was in Texas 100 years ago before.
Good thing I wasn't there, because let me tell you, one of the biggest fights.
Well, they didn't even know it existed, so they just had to deal with it.
What I was going to tell you is one of the biggest fights I ever had with Todd was getting this car. And I've had this car for 5 years now. And he was like, why do you need AC in the seats? And I was like, don't you dare tell a 40-something-year-old woman why they need AC in the seats. Well, now even more than ever, I'm 51 and I like it cold. I like it cold. I like it a little ice.
You don't feel like when you sit on that you peed your pants? Every time I turn my air conditioned seats on, I feel like the cold goes up my butt. I'm like,
because you're older than me. You probably are peeing your pants.
I probably did pee my pants. That's true. Like,
are peeing your
maybe
pants.
I should check. Have you thought about ways people tried to stay cool back in the day, back 100 years ago?
I would stick my head in the ice box. How did they?
Well, actually, that's one of the ways that they did it. There were places would go way up north and get ice and bring it down and store it in cool places, which I don't even know how you do that. I guess
like their wagon. If it was me, I would sit on a block of ice.
Yeah, there were actually places where they stored ice blocks during the winter, and then they were used in the warmer months. But I guess they were stored deep underground. But there's a picture of the place we're actually going to in this article. I pulled up the Timberline Lodge in Oregon, where it was 55 degrees, and out in front of this Timberline Lodge, they had these huge stacks of ice, and kids were licking the ice blocks.
Oh, that looks like
yummy,
a hepatitis party.
Yeah. But water fountains. So water fountains were a big deal. A way bigger deal back then. And a lot of them, you think of water fountain like down on Town Lake, you push the little button and water comes out. These were actually more like troughs. And people would stick their heads in them and drink out of them. And sometimes in the western towns, the horses would drink out of them.
I was built for the modern world. I'm sorry, I was. But when I went to school in the valley when I was a kid, we didn't have AC down in the Rio Grande Valley. Yeah. They just opened the doors. I remember getting gnats in my mouth. You'd just be fully soaked, just
sweating.
Yeah. So
have you ever heard of a swamp cooler?
Yeah, I've heard. That's like Arizona.
in the desert in California, because it gets pretty hot out there, I was asking somebody I knew that lived out there back before air conditioning, and they would do what they would hang wet sheets in the doorways or around the porch, and the breeze going through those sheets cools the air. That's basically what a swamp cooler is. It's water run over, or air run over water, and it cools it off. But it doesn't work in humid places.
How is that not like a mildew?
Well, that's actually the machines that do that. The reason they call them swamp coolers is because the condensation builds up in the bottom and it gets all nasty and mildewy and it stinks and it smells like a swamp.
Oh, that doesn't sound attractive.
No.
I don't know. Let's turn the AC on 68 and don't
Yeah,
come at me.
yeah. And high ceilings were something that came about because of not having air conditioning.
Because heat rises?
Heat rises, exactly. And if you ever see some of the really old places, a lot of times they'll have like I can't even remember what it's called. It's the high ceiling and then it goes up a little bit more and then there's windows up there that can open. What do they call that? I can't even remember. Anyway, there's a term for it. But the hot air goes up and then it goes out the windows. So the air circulates through and it cools off the building.
Well, I would have to be royalty and just have somebody fan me all the time.
Yeah. Well, and actually in Egypt, that's one of the things I read. In Egypt, the pharaohs, they would hang wet blankets basically, and then their servants would fan the blankets to cool them off. That's how they kept, because it's 120 degrees.
I'd either want to be the servant fanning because I'd get it too, or the one being fanned.
Front porches were something that came about for heat relief, so you could sit in the shade on your front porch.
Well, yeah, my great grandmother had a back porch, and it was screened in, and why can't I think of the name of it right now? But you'd sleep out. We'd sleep out on the back
sleeping porch. Yeah.
Little day bed. You'd sit in the day bed and you'd sleep out there.
When I lived in Spain when I was younger, they were still closing down for siesta, which is...
I'm a big proponent of siestas.
Yes, I know you are.
Can we do nap time?
I think it was noon, or maybe it was 1. All the businesses would close until about 4 or 5, and then they'd reopen. And I never understood it, but it was because...
It was hot?
It was too hot in the day to be working. So they'd go work in the morning, and they'd work at night. So your day was split up. But
we're gonna do as the Spanish do from now on at Mallett Integrity Team. Can I just... Siesta.
Yeah, siesta. I'll just come in. Hey, Michelle, can you do a siesta?
Although yesterday, I think I was here almost 11 hours.
It was a long day.
It was a very long day.
But in like New York City, places where they would have heat waves, people would take the middle of the day off. They didn't call it siesta, obviously, but they would go sleep in the park.
Didn't you
Central
say
Park.
April said that our friend April, our little expat friend, she was on the podcast a couple podcasts ago. Didn't you say she said it was 85 degrees?
She's in Bristol in England right now, and they're having a heat wave, and it's 85 degrees, and it's never been 85
that would
degrees
be a
there
cold
ever
front
before.
here right now.
I'd take 85 degrees, but if you're used to 70, they're not used to that.
Yeah, like I said, I'm built for modern times.
Yeah,
I'm
me too.
Just a pretty
I
little
think
princess.
if we all got transported back 100 years, we'd probably all be dead in about a week.
Yeah, because I wouldn't have AC in my wagon.
That's true. And you'd have to drink out of a great big water trough with the horses.
Did they have iced tea
Push the
back
horses
then?
out of the way. I don't know.
How would I live without iced tea? If the trough was filled with iced tea, I'd be okay.
You'd be okay. Yeah.
I'd be okay.
Hey, I saw this, actually heard about it on the radio, the 10 most patriotic states in the U.S. Wallet Hub, have you ever heard of that? It's a website. They do a bunch of financial things. But they rated the top 10 most patriotic states in the country.
According to what? What was their criteria?
It was actually kind of funny. It says used a bunch of metrics, but the percentage of adults who voted in the 2016 primaries and elections, the rate of both Peace Corps and AmeriCorps volunteers, which the number of military enlistees per capita, and the number of veterans per capita. And I was thinking, I think there's other ways to gauge patriotism.
I think so too. I think that's a biased report. I'm gonna throw it out.
I agree. Well, they said something in the original entry about being thankful for how the government reacted to COVID, so that we could all go have a 4th of July. But take it with a grain of salt. But I want to go through their list.
I'm stop listening now. Okay, go ahead.
Stop it. Yeah, I mean, you could just ask people, right? How much do you love your country? Or do you love your country? Yes or no? If you say you love your country, then you're patriotic.
I think a lot of people right now, not a lot of people, I think a lot of people are divided. And I've heard a couple of people that didn't even want to celebrate the 4th of July.
That's actually starting to be a trend.
And I think that's disgusting, quite honestly. And coming from a military family and having a kid that's in the military, I think they can.
I agree with that.
So,
and the sacrifices that people have made so that we can live this great life in this great country. We do have some issues, but it's still a great country.
Absolutely.
It's one of the best places in the world to live.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. But do you want to hear the list? I'll run through it real quick.
I'll listen. Hold on. Let me put my eyes back. Okay, go.
Yeah. Number 10, South Carolina.
Okay. Good food.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have a comment on everyone.
Okay.
Go ahead. Go through.
Number 9, Minnesota.
Minnesota. Annie lives in Minnesota, and they have good cheese there.
Annie?
Next to Wisconsin.
Who's Annie?
Annie, my friend Annie. Crazy Annie.
Okay. Did she send you cheese for Christmas?
She's in Minnesota right now.
Okay. Wisconsin has cheese.
Wisconsin. Cheeseheads. Okay.
Cheeseheads.
They're crazy football fans.
I already noticed a trend here. These are all northern places. Yeah. Well, I guess South Carolina's not. And Wisconsin, North Dakota.
North Dakota?
Yeah. What are you?
Okay.
It's cold.
Is that Fargo?
Fargo. Yeah, that's right.
Murderers and serial killers. Okay.
Utah.
Mormons.
Yes. Maryland.
Crab.
No.
Crabs. There's Crab, Maryland.
No.
Yes.
When I think of Maryland, I think of Washington, D.C. Isn't that where people live when they work in Washington, D.C.?
And they eat crab.
Oh, okay. This one, I believe, Alaska.
Eskimos.
No. Bears.
Eskimos.
No. Maybe way, way, way up north.
There's Eskimos in Alaska.
They're not walking around Anchorage.
You never know. All the Eskimos, right, Steve?
Yeah. I think Alaska is probably one of the most patriotic states. Those people love freedom. And there's a real thing up there where they don't like the government to get in their way.
They want to live their lives. Too.
Yeah, probably would. Yeah. Idaho.
Potatoes.
Wyoming.
Yellowstone. Yeah. Or is that Montana?
I think it touches Yellowstone.
I don't know. It's one of those flyover states.
What's the name of that show?
Yellowstone.
Oh, yeah.
But I think it's a flyover state.
Okay. John Dutton. And number 1, I never would have guessed this. And I actually think it's not right. But
okay.
New Hampshire.
See, my cousin lives in New Hampshire, and I said I didn't even really think people lived in New Hampshire. I thought that they just voted in New Hampshire. I didn't think I think this is a bias. I don't like this. I don't like that one. So,
Yeah, and I noticed that they're not going to let Florida or Texas be on.
Absolutely not.
Which I think is full. Texas is full of patriots.
Yeah, I'm trying to be respectful and not use my my naughty corner words. But
anyway, you got to be careful about what you read because it's not all true.
That's right, and I'll give an opinion on everything.
Yeah, and I think Texas should be in the top 2 or 3 for sure.
You know, we're going to have Walt Smith on today as our guest, and one of the topics that is on a lot of people's mind is traffic here in Dripping Springs,
traffic
Austin.
And taxes.
Oh, traffic and taxes for sure. Starts with a T.
Yeah.
And I was thinking there's a lot of people that come here to Texas or even live here, and they don't really understand kind of our road system. It's interesting. And I was doing a little research, and I found out that the highways in the U.S. are split up into 4 different main types of systems. Okay. Interstate highways.
Right.
So IH-35.
Federal roads.
Federal roads, right? So it's like they connect different states together. U.S. highways. So think of a U.S. highway.
That would be a state highway.
No, there's a U.S. highway and a state highway.
I would think 290.
Well, I think there's the U.S. and then state highways, which is 290.
U.S. highway would be
state highways.
Route 66.
Yes. Yeah. State highways serve major centers of metropolitan areas, including cities and towns. So maybe that's also I don't think it's Loop 1. County highways, like 12.
Okay.
Right.
So what is 290? Is that? That would be a state highway?
I think that's a state highway. Okay. Wisconsin was the first state to number highways in 1918, followed by Michigan, which I thought that was kind of cool. But then
and those states were not on the most patriotic list.
They weren't, because I think that pull is crap.
Yes. Okay.
Secondary highways. Secondary highways are like FMs. What does FM stand for?
Farm to market.
Farm to market. Beltways, park roads, loops, spurs. I've seen the word spurs before, not like on your boots, but I didn't really, I was having a hard time figuring out what a spur was. But
I always thought a spur was like a road that didn't go anywhere. It was like a main road, but it ended.
It's like when I come into my office. It's the road.
That's right. The road to nowhere. Yes.
Recreational roads. There's actually roads and then parish roads. So in like Louisiana, they're not counties, they're parishes. And so their roads are parish roads.
So that would be like our county roads.
And then there's also county highways, so you can kind of get really down deeper. Yeah. And then at the bottom level, there's also, these are recognized actual roads, bike routes, Indian routes, forest highways, and township routes.
I've never heard of all that.
So I just thought it was kind of cool. So I know a big part of our conversation today with Walt Smith is going to be on roads and what this area is looking at fixing. And one of the questions I have is, what actually does TxDOT pay for? What is TxDOT responsible for? What is the city responsible for? What is the county responsible for? And so I think it kind of goes all in line with these interstate highways, state highways and such. So
I want to ask him about the tax system, because I feel like there's no reason our taxes should be increasing at the rate that they are.
No, I'm very worried about staying in the house that we are in, that we've lived in for 16 years, looking at retirement and beyond.
It looks to me like there are going to be a lot of people as they approach retirement that will have to sell their properties because they can't afford the property taxes.
I agree. So,
on a limited income.
We're just going to go buy a commune and live together.
Yeah,
AC.
That's right.
Can there be AC?
Yeah. No AC. I'll make you a big water trough out back.
It would fill the tea.
Yeah. So hang on. We're going to take a little break and we're going to get Walt in here and we will talk to you in a second.
This show is brought to you in part by the Mallett Integrity Team, serving Dripping Springs, Austin, and the surrounding areas of Central Texas since 2004. When you need the best real estate advice and service, give them a call at 512-829-2062 or email them at mallettintegrityteam.com.
Well, we're back with Walt Smith, County Commissioner, Precinct 4. Thanks for coming on the show.
Anytime. I appreciate the invitation.
Yeah. We were excited to get you on, and I think Michelle and I are both a little nervous because you're like high profile.
I don't know if that's good or bad.
Yeah, no kidding.
It's a very leading statement.
No. When did you move to Dripping Springs?
We actually moved here. My family moved here and purchased a home in December of 2012.
Okay.
I had been living in Washington, D.C. before that. Of course, grew up in Texas, went to school here in Texas, and then went to D.C. to work for some Texas members of Congress in agriculture, and couldn't wait to get home, actually, once I had kids. And so
and that's the truth.
Why Drip?
Yeah.
Well, I when I first moved back, I wanted to be somewhere close to an airport, but I grew up in a very, very small town. And I didn't want to raise the whole purpose of me moving back to Texas and move my family back was not to live in a city. Mm-hmm. And so we moved to Dripping, really fell in love with it. Had a couple friends who they had moved here. And of course, their kids were growing up here and loved the school system and loved playing sports and those kind of things. Yeah. And that's what drew us here,
It's a great community. And that's one of the reasons we do this podcast, because we want people to know people in the community like you that are involved in making it a better place than it is. And where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Hill County, Hillsboro, Texas. Okay. Actually, I claim Hillsboro, but that's where I went to school, and my mom taught school there for a long time.
Steve asked me if I knew where Hillsboro was, and I said, duh, the outlet mall's there. Of course I know where Hillsboro
All
is.
3 stores that are left.
Right?
It's very cyclical there as far as the economy. I grew up, and it was very much a farming and ranching community. Yeah. Then they built an outlet mall. It's more or less defunct now. Then it was the home of, for quite a while, the home of the Barnett Shell. There was a huge Barnett Shell play there. And so it was the oil and gas economy for a little while. And now it's kind of back to a farming community, which has kind of sustained it throughout the whole time. So.
And you grew up on a cattle farm.
Right. I grew up on a ranch. Like I said, I claim Hillsboro. I actually grew up close to a little town called Milford, which is in Ellis County. Our ranch is pretty close to the county line there. And grew up, chasing cattle a lot and very, very active in 4-H. I was a district officer in 4-H.
Oh, wow.
And, ended up, when I went to college, working at the State 4-H Center for a couple of years in college, and really enjoyed that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and you went to A&M.
I did. I graduated from high school in 93 and went to Texas A&M. Thought I would be a county agent. That was my dream after working at being in 4-H as a kid forever. And so my undergrad was in agricultural education and agricultural development. I thought I'd be, trimming show cattle and picking out pigs for kids to show and those kind of things. And so that's what my undergrad was. I did my student teaching in the thriving metropolis, Iola, Texas, which at the time was it's close to Huntsville. It was big news when I was there because it went from 1A to 2A. They could actually play real football. They thought, but they didn't do very well whenever they made that big adjustment.
And you have a teaching certificate. So were you ever a teacher, or you just? I did
my teaching there in Iola for only half a year. And then I went straight into grad school, and my master's is in ag development with an emphasis on agricultural and public policy. Really thought that I was very involved in the leadership program at A&M. They have an agricultural leadership program. And so I taught a couple classes there in agricultural leadership. And, one of my graduate assistantships, I actually there's 3 or 4 classes that they teach through agriculture in high school in Texas through ag education. And I did all the curriculum for them. I was a curriculum developer.
So your mom was a teacher. Where'd you get this bug for politics and government?
My dad, my mom taught forever. And my dad was always very involved in our community, whether it was, he was on our local electric co-op board, or he was in the Lions Club and those kind of things. And it was really a love for civic service.
Okay.
And where I grew up, there wasn't really a whole lot of politics. Whenever I grew up there had never been a Republican elected to office in the history of the county.
They were all Democrats?
All Democrats. And so, of course, you had in every primary, there were probably 4 Democrats that ran for each office, but never a Republican. And my mom and dad were actually the first Republican election judge and election clerk in our county.
Wow.
And it was kind of a funny conversation whenever it happened. One of the gentleman who was the head election judge came to my dad and said, I'm not guessing as to how you vote, but the state says we have to have a Republican election judge. And I'm just wondering, if we were to ask you to be a Republican election judge, would you qualify for that, or would you do that? And my dad's like, yeah, I would do that. And he goes, that's great. They said we have to have a Republican clerk too. Do you think your wife would be able to do that? And so that's how it happened. In the first Republican primary that they ran, they had a grand total of 4 people vote in it, including them.
Whoa.
One of them knew what they were doing. The other one was one of our neighbors who was probably in her 80s, and she came in and saw my dad, said, hey, how are you doing, Byron? I'm here to vote. He handed her the ballot. She voted, and on her way out, she saw her other friend who was the Democrat precinct judge. And his name, believe it or not, was Tudor. And she goes,
I believe it.
She goes, Tudor, what are you doing? I was wondering why Byron was working the election and not you. And he goes, oh, that was the Republican primary. Oh my God.
Oh, she didn't.
I've never voted Republican in my life. I want that ballot back. And they're like, ma'am, it's in the box. I can't do anything about it. And so there's a 25% error rate in that Republican primary. So. The rural areas now are pretty Republican, right? So that's a pretty big shift. You've come from a farming community, and it's all Democrats.
It was old dog Democrats.
Yeah.
It was.
What's the difference now between how it was then and how it is now?
Well, that community is 100% Republican now. There's not a Democrat elected. And, statewide in the mid-'90s, there was a big shift in Texas. And what's interesting is, you know, my grandfather was a yellow dog Democrat.
Yeah.
I remember having a conversation with him. My sister was in high school, and she was a page for they had the Republican National Convention in '84 in Dallas. And they went all over the state and got young people to be pages for that. And so my sister volunteered for it. And I remember, you know, at the time I was 9, I guess, walking out of the front door of my grandparents' house, and I was sitting on the front porch, and he was my grandfather, who was my mother's father. I was talking to my dad, and he goes, you know, I might be able to save Walt. You know, Margaret, she's gone. She's far gone now. She's a Republican. She went to that convention. She's lost. But I might be able to save Walt. And it was just that adamant about there was no mixing of the parties at that time. And I think,
Walt, there's no mixing of the parties now.
Well, and what I think the thing that bothers me is that now, both in the Republican and Democratic primary, there is an absolute purity test. Mm-hmm. And that absolute purity test has nothing to do, 90%, I'll use the county stuff. 90% of the stuff that's discussed has nothing to do with county business, mm-hmm. nothing to do with any decision-making ability that the county would have. It's about what's best for the community. And in our primary system, we've gotten so far. You know, you see in the Democratic primaries for Congress or the Republican primaries for Congress, a lot of the time you see the absolute extremes getting elected in those primaries. And the way redistricting works, those, you know, I would say, well, just a good example at the federal level, 20 years ago, probably a quarter of the congressional seats were what you would call competitive seats. You know, they're 5 points one way or the other, Republican or Democrat. Now you've probably got less than 10% of those. And I think 2 cycles ago, I saw a study that said there was only 17 seats that were competitive in the entire U.S. Out of 435. And so that tells you that those races are won or lost in March, not in November.
In the primaries.
And so in order to get through those, you end up with I'm not going to say extreme views, but very much a farther right view and a farther left view.
I call it people living in the wings.
Well, and you those folks in the middle, Ronald Reagan was a deal maker. You know, he said, if my enemy is my friend 20% or votes with me 20% of the time, I can figure out how to make something work. Yeah. And I'm not going to eviscerate somebody who votes with me 80% of the time just because they don't have the right letter behind their name. And so what I think we've lost a lot of sight in, not only in my party, but in the Democrat Party, is the fact that we still have to work together. And at the end of the day, especially at a local level, I'm going to see you at HEB in line. Yeah. Or, our kids are going to play sports together. I may end up coaching your kid. And so that when you lose that connection to the community.
The civility of it all.
Well, I think I'm going to blame it on social media, because now there's a trend towards, not only am I going to disagree with you, I'm going to hate you because you have the other letter behind or in front of your name.
Well, yeah, you have the social media justice warriors will go and obliviate you.
And there is there's no nuance at all. It's like, I'm not even going to listen to what you have to say. If you're not on my side, if you're not in my tribe, I hate you. And
I see it's even happening in the own party though too. Absolutely. Even in the own party, it's like it's the haves and the have-nots and the personal attacks that are coming across people. It's no longer about the job. You're almost like having to defend yourself personally. Yeah.
Well, and what you find now is, I say this, I sound like an old man, but, used to it was about, what do you want for your community? Yeah. And that's the way I believe it should be. And what we've progressed into is now we have a large cross section of voters, whether they're Republican, whether they're Democrat, they're single issue voters. Mm-hmm. And they're going to agree with you 85% of the time, especially if you have the opportunity to sit down and talk about an issue.
I know that's true.
The problem is that, here in my precinct now, we've got over 60,000 residents just in my precinct in Hays County. And so that being the case, you can't talk to every single resident. Yeah. And so it's much easier, instead of having a conversation, just saying, well, I don't agree with you on this one issue, so therefore you're a bad person. And you can, with text messaging and with social media ads, used to, it might cost thousands of dollars to send a mailer out to all the voters in the precinct, right? Well, you can send out a text message for 4 cents.
Yeah.
And so it's, on readership, you look at mailers. Whenever you get a mailer in the mail, generally about 18% readership, below 20%.
I would think that's high, yeah.
And a text message, it's like 82%. When your phone goes off, you look at it. And so that messaging, it makes an impact. And so it's a different world than we used to live in, and when it comes to campaigns and those kind of things. But it's also one where people, they want to be more informed voters, and I think they're searching for it. But again, I fall prey to it as well. I don't watch CNN. I watch Fox News. I don't, and so at times I have to stop and look at the issues that I'm really working on and say, am I in a tunnel on this?
Right.
Am I, or am I in an echo chamber where what I say is and so it's you have to be cognizant of that, because there are a lot of voices in our community who, they just really aren't heard.
Yeah.
And it's hard for them to really engage.
Yeah.
You've been given plenty of opportunity, though, too, I think, to have public forums and people to come meet you personally. And
I was going to say, don't you, on the first Tuesday of the month from 1 to 5 at the county courthouse, people can come in and talk to you? Is that one of the things you do?
I have office hours all the time, but specifically at the county courthouse, really almost every session of the court, I leave open. Whenever the court ends, I hang out at the courthouse. Anybody can come see me. But really, I have to tell you, it's hard for folks to get. I almost feel like we're in two separate counties, right?
Yeah.
I mean, before redistricting, I represented within 2 blocks of the county courthouse in San Marcos, all the way to the far northern tip of the county.
Oh,
and so it took me an hour and 35 minutes to drive across my county between meetings. Now I can drive across it in about 20 minutes because of population and redistricting. But what I would say is the vast majority of folks that I've had the ability to interact with, I probably did over 80 HOA meetings last year.
Oh.
Where you just come in and speak to them?
They asked me to come in, talk to their neighborhood. One might be about the fire code and, what's going on with the fire code. We adopted a fire code in Hays County in 2020. One might be, okay, well, our neighborhood, there's a development going in right next door. What can you tell us about it?
What was the most consistent, reoccurring question or problem that you saw kind of across these HOAs that people were really kind of saying, hey, what are you going to do about this?
Gosh, everyone's different, and I say that it's definitely development pressure is everywhere. And we're facing pressures here that literally no one else in the country has. And what a lot of people don't know is that counties have no zoning authority. We don't have any ability. There's really a handful of things that we have. You can count them on one hand. Is it in a floodplain? Does it meet our platting requirements, which are statutory? What does the septic system look like? And if it's above 5,000 gallons, we don't have say over that. Or if it's piped out sewage, we don't have any say over that. And if it's commercial, then does it meet fire code? Those are really the only things that the county has purview over. If they're connecting to a county road, they have to have a driveway permit or something like that. But it's very minimal, and it's been that way for a long time. I mean, the history of the state. The other thing that people don't realize is as that development comes in, if you say you drop 50 homes on a city street, then the city has the ability to say you are going to impact the city roadway. Yeah. And so there's going to be an impact fee with that. We need you to do a transportation analysis, a TIA, transportation impact analysis, to tell us what impact that's going to have. And we're going to look at that and decide that you have to do, turn lanes or a acceleration, deceleration lane, this kind of signage. And the state has the same ability. If they drop that same development on a county road, we don't have that ability.
You don't have the ability to determine how the road's constructed if it's accessed on a county road?
We have the ability to determine how it's going to be structured in the future, but we don't have the ability to require them to do it and pay for it. And
who does? Who does have the ability to? Is it
cities and state?
So that's one of the questions that I had is like, people mention TxDOT, and with all the traffic issues that we're kind of just being bombarded with in Dripping Springs, my little 12-minute drive sometimes during school from Sawyer Ranch here to where our studio is and our office is, it has taken me 30, 45 minutes before to get in here. And I'm like,
mine's worse than that. I live over by Time and Doe, which is half a mile. And there are mornings when school's in, it takes me over 10 minutes to get here.
Walk your lazy butt.
I literally
I've got this file.
I know.
I live south of 150 on 12. And I pulled out of my neighborhood before and just stopped when I pulled out in 37 minutes from there to Walnut Springs Elementary.
So
Are you serious?
What does TxDOT have control over? What does the county have control over? What does the city have control? So dumb it down for
if it's a state highway like 290 or 12 or 150 or 1826, those are all within the state purview.
And that's TxDOT.
That's TxDOT. If it's within the city limits of Dripping Springs, so
like a Mercer.
Like a Mercer Street,
okay.
that is under the purview of the city of Dripping Springs. If it's in the unincorporated area of the county, then it's under Hays County.
So
and
the
that's
ETJ,
not just the ETJ, the unincorporated as well. So, say Darden Hill Road or Sawyer Ranch Road or Nutty Brown or Fitzhugh, those are all county roadways. And what we've seen a lot of is that development tends to happen where there's infrastructure, large scale development, where there's infrastructure, where they can tie into water, wastewater, those kind of things. And those tend to be within the ETJ of Dripping Springs or City of Buda or wherever. Mm-hmm. And if they're in the ETJ, those cities have control over how that infrastructure is done and how those work, other than the four things that I just told you, the platting, and that kind of stuff.
So the county then, what can the county specifically do to alleviate some of the traffic problems that we have in Dripping Springs? And can it do anything?
Sure. Well, we've been working, some counties don't work with TxDOT at all. And I say that there are counties in the state of Texas that really don't have any relationship whatsoever with TxDOT. We are very blessed here to have a very, very good working relationship with TxDOT. Just an example of that, before I was ever elected, back in 2016, the residents of Hays County passed a bond that had a number of projects in it, a transportation bond, a public safety bond. And on the transportation side, there were a large number of projects. A lot of them were located on state highways. And the purpose behind that is, for example, I'll use Troutwine at 290 as an example.
Very dangerous road.
Troutwine at 290 was identified as a very dangerous intersection, right? There are literally hundreds of intersections that quote meet warrant within the TxDOT system, and when I say meet warrant, that means they warrant a light or they warrant some type of change into it. The county looked at that and said, okay, well, maybe it's number 450 on the list, right? Eventually it will get there. We're concerned about safety today.
Yeah.
It might take 10 years, 12 years to get that project done through TxDOT, but we're willing to use funds from the county and pay for the engineering to have an AFA, which is a funding agreement, advanced funding agreement with the state to say, look, we will do that. We will do that intersection because we want that safety improvement right now. For example, Troutwine, the light that is there now is a temporary light. Mm-hmm. You can notice it's on wooden poles. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We worked through the state to get clearance for that light, and it's an oddity. It's much, much taller than any light you'll see around. And the reason for that is that as you're coming down Troutwine, if it was a regular light, you wouldn't be able to see it, right? So we worked very closely with the state of Texas to provide for that temporary light until the final intersection is designed and, ready to go. We hope that'll be let before the end of the year. Oh. But the county paid for the engineering, is paying for the construction on that because we see the need.
You found work around the red tape.
Well, you were talking at one of the presentations we went to, one of the realtor presentations, about the reason that that trout line specifically has been so hard is because that hump has a bunch of utility
relocation.
Yeah. And that's got to be the biggest issue with that, right?
It is. I mean, I'll tell you that I say this somewhat facetiously, but every utility that goes into Dripping Springs comes straight down 290 and it goes underneath that hump at Troutline. And so the finalized project will actually have turn lanes there, a permanent intersection, and then that hump will go away. We'll cut that down, and there'll be repavement all the way past.
What's the timeline for that?
I think we're probably going to go to bid before the end of the year. We were shooting for the end of last year, but we had some TxDOT funds that the state was putting into the project that they had to pull back. Hays County got hit not as hard as some counties. Yeah. But we had a number of projects that TxDOT had committed funding to, or that CAMPO, which is our regional transportation authority, had committed funding to. And about, I guess, 2 years ago, there was an agreement between CAMPO and TxDOT to put several $100 million into all the improvements that were anticipated for I-35. And when they did that, in order to pay for that commitment, they both TxDOT and CAMPO deferred projects, which meant that they still supported the projects. They said, yes, we're going to do it, but we're going to push the timeline back on it. Gotcha. And we will fund those. Those will be kind of first in the pipeline. When we get additional funding, we'll fund those first. We had a couple of those on a couple of those projects like Troutline, and I had another one in my, whenever I had the portion of San Marcos on Limekill Road, a bridge there that were deferred, another project that was deferred, but we had some of those projects on both. Either we were getting money from CAMPO or we were getting money from TxDOT, and the timelines on those got pushed because of it.
So the bridge on Creek Road that's under construction right now, that's under your purview, correct? Tell us what's going on there and when's it going to be done?
Sure. So that project was,
and the reason I'm asking is because I have a bunch of cyclist friends, and there's no way to get around that bridge.
Want to know now.
Yeah,
exactly. So that's an interesting project. So it's called an off-system bridge. It's actually TxDOT managing that construction of that bridge, but off-system bridges, which means they're not on the state highway system. They're on a county system or a city system. The state still has the responsibility of inspecting them. And a number of years ago, back in 2015, 2016, TxDOT came out and looked at that bridge and said, you've got some problems you probably need to address. You need to start thinking about replacement of that bridge. My biggest concern, and so the county started engineering on what that bridge should look like and how it should be replaced. My biggest concern whenever I was elected, they were still trying to do some minor adjustments to the design. And it's a project where TxDOT actually pays for it. They manage the project, but it's on our system. Okay. So once it goes in, it's our bridge, right? My biggest concern was, and I love engineers, I work with them every day, but an engineer is going to build a bridge. He's not going to necessarily he's going to do it for functionality. Right. He's going to do it for how many cars can get across it and what's the volume that's needed and how much water is going to go in there. They're not going to look at, how does this fit into the structure of what Creek Road is? I mean, Creek Road is a very special place, and
when we moved here, I said that was one of the prettiest roads I've ever been on. It's a beautiful road.
Right. And so some of the concerns that we had were if you take out a true low water crossing like that was actually a bridge, but it functioned as a low water crossing in flooding. How do you keep the closest aesthetic you can and still meet TxDOT standards? And it's a fine line. I mean,
I didn't think about that.
But hopefully that should be done. We're hoping by the end of the summer, actually. The thing with structures like that, And I've actually talked to a couple of residents. They go, we haven't seen any work in the last week. Well, I get daily updates on it and photos of it and those kind of things. That's all. They had to first dry out the creek there. And so they put in dams on either side of it and they're pumping the water around it. So the creek still flows and everything's still working. But they had to dry it out and they're actually pouring in place that bridge. So they're pouring the concrete there. And so unless you're on top of it, you can't really see it because there's a dam on either side.
Yeah.
But like I said, we get these daily updates. The timeline for it was 90 to 120 days. And we think we'll hit that.
Good.
And so it took a little bit longer to dry out the bottom of the creek bed than they anticipated. But the pours the last week gone really well. And
I'm the race director, one of the race directors for the Run by the Creek, which crosses that bridge, and it's November 13th. So as long as you're done by November 13th, we're good.
So
we're shooting for the first, before the first week or first couple of weeks of the school year.
Oh, good.
You should have a ribbon cutting for the bridge, Steve,
Yes,
and
we
have
should.
sign up.
We should.
I'm going to inject a little bit of logic here. So I hear a lot of red tape. I hear a lot of thought process that goes into these projects. And as just the average citizen, you see a need or an issue with a particular road or traffic, and then that it's identified, and then it should be fixed, right? It's like boom, ba, boom. It's easy, bada bing, bada boom. But it doesn't work that way, does it? And there's just this whole system and process and it's infuriating as a homeowner, as a resident, that this process takes so long to complete. And just even the workaround around dripping springs. I know we were talking about the development, and to me, it's like, okay, well, if the developers are causing more traffic, well, then stop bringing more development in. And it sounds logical, right? But talk me down here.
I think there's a misconception out there that the county or that the city or that the state is bringing in development. The fact is, Texas is a true true private property ownership state. And, I had this conversation with some residents the other day that they purchased their homes here in a development. And when they purchased their homes, they were overlooking this large ranch. And, they've told me that they paid a premium for their lots because they were overlooking, they had this great view of this large ranch. Well, lo and behold, somebody buys the ranch and they want to put houses on it, or they want to put a business on it. And so the current resident next door is very upset. And it's a very hard conversation when you go, they want to put houses there. Well, you need to stop that. And I go, well, I'm glad nobody stopped it 3 years ago, right before your house was built. And so as fundamentally a private property state, you can depend on the fact that it's always going to change as long as somebody has the ability to monetize or to improve their property. And I don't know where the cutoff is. Where I have a concern is truly the resources that go into it. And me personally, my background is pretty heavy in conservation and water stuff, water policy. I worked for the National Rural Water Association for a number of years, and our whole job was getting water into rural areas, or wastewater, getting sewage out of rural areas. And my biggest concern is that at this point, I've spoke to people this week whose wells are going dry. And a lot of the development that's coming in here, if it's on a pipeline, then it's not groundwater from here, it's surface water from someplace else, or groundwater from someplace else. Now I can buy into that. Yeah. What I want to do, and what I've worked on a number of initiatives to do, is to try to find ways where we can get more people off of well water and off of well services here, because at the end of the day, you can only put so many straws in the cup and it's going to run out of water. And that's a concern for me. Yeah.
Let's kind of back up a little bit and talk about the commissioner's roles. And then I want to talk a little bit about taxes too.
Sure.
So what is your job? What is your role as county commissioner? Just kind of give us the 30,000-foot view.
Sure. So our county in Texas, the counties are kind of an oddity in the fact that they were really the last branch of government that was established. You had major municipalities, Houston, Dallas, San Antonio, and you had state government. And if you look at the names of most of the counties, you'll notice that they were started after, late 1800s and the reason for that was they really were struggling to find that level of government to handle a lot of the stuff that small towns couldn't do, large towns didn't want to do. As a county commissioner, we look at we have a pretty wide portfolio. I mean, a pretty broad and diverse portfolio. I say that, this week I had meetings, or this previous week I had meetings specific to, road construction projects. I had meetings on mental health and how I'm trying to work with some of the school districts on how you can better address mental health. Over 60% of our county budget goes into the justice system. It's our sheriff's departments and sheriff department employees, our jail.
What percentage? 60?
Over 60% of the county taxes that you pay goes into the judicial system.
Wow.
Either paying for courts and judges or law enforcement. And, on top of that, we've got our juvenile probation departments, our regular probation departments. We run all the elections in the county. We are the the county collects taxes for every taxing entity in the county. And that's, 120, 130 taxing entities in the county. There's always, you mentioned taxes a little while ago. There's always a lot of confusion, because when you write your check, you write it to Hays County. And if you look in general, it's generally the second to fourth largest number on your tax bill is Hays County. I think our average property owner now in Hays County pays somewhere in the neighborhood of just under $1,100 in county taxes. Now I can tell you I paid a whole lot more than that in taxes last year. But if you live in a MUD, a municipal utility district, or a special utility district, generally the city, that's generally the second highest, and then the county falls in behind that, and you have your emergency service districts, your special districts, those kind of things.
School district is
always the biggest
by far,
and it depending on where you live, it's generally 60 to 70% of your overall tax bill is schools. But back to the functionality of the job, it's really, to put it in layman's terms, counties are, they're managed by a 5-person commissioner's court. And that's every county in Texas. Whether you have 500 residents or you've got 5 million, you have 5 members on the commissioner's court. It's divided up your county every 10 years with a census by population. And those 4 commissioners and 1 county judge make those funding decisions, make those overall decisions for the county.
What are the requirements for you to be a commissioner or the judge?
It's funny. The judge, who's the county judge, is the title is really a leftover. It's a remnant of.
You don't even have to be a lawyer, right?
No. You don't have to do. You can be a county judge. And just in title only. If you want, the state offers a stipend if you actually do judicial functions. And I think it's like $30,000 or $35,000 a year.
Okay.
You have to do continuing education and get certified or get licensed to do that. But a county judge is only able to do probate and magistration.
Okay.
And those are the only 2 things. They're even if they go through the training and get that certification, that's the only true judicial role they have.
Okay.
It's more or less a manager or the chair of the county commissioner's court. As far as being a commissioner, it's like any elected office. There's no set requirement to get elected to it other than the vote of the general public in your area. But then we also have continuing education that we as commissioners have to do. I actually was and those are offered at conferences from, we go to the South Texas County Judges and Commissioners Conference or the state, generally the Texas Association of Counties does. Just left one of those. I went to one in the South Texas one in Corpus Christi a couple of weeks ago. And got, I think, 14 or 16 continuing education credits during that.
And the judge doesn't have any more control over than the commissioners as far as votes. It's 5 equal votes.
Correct.
Okay. And the budget decisions, you guys are in control of the entire county budget.
Correct. So the budget is changed a little bit this year, or it will change this year. So in the past, as long as you're below 200,000, the county judge actually sets the budget, and then we amend it.
200,000 residents.
200,000 residents.
Yeah.
Statutorily, or maybe 225, but one of those is the statutory change, and we're required to have a budget office after that. And so we established a budget office a couple of months ago. We have one of our longtime county auditor staff has been named the budget officer, or budget director for the county. And now she is going through and actually meeting with each of the department heads, with each of the elected officials in the county. We all, our budget submissions were due electronically in May.
Okay.
So we turned all those in, each department head and elected official. And so she's going through that. We'll start our budget process. There's very stringent deadlines and requirements statutorily on how we adopt our budget. And at the end of the day, we name all those priorities. We figure out exactly how much that's going to cost. And we get the overall budget number of what will be collected. And then we set the tax rate.
Okay. Well, that's what I wanted to talk about that, because, if you see some of the posts on social media, people think that you guys are just the way the tax system works is the value on the house goes up and then the rate goes up, and you guys just get this windfall every year. But it's actually sort of that's backwards. You guys have a budget, how much the values are, and then the tax rate is determined what rate of those values need to be to collect the amount for the budget.
Correct.
I think that's real important, because I think a lot of people are very confused about how our tax system works.
Well, and I agree. The taxes on your house it's a pretty easy equation. There's only a few factors that go into it.
Right.
What is the appraisal?
Mm-hmm.
What's the tax rate? That's pretty quick math.
Yeah.
The one thing that we have direct control over at a county is the rate. And what a lot of people don't know is, since I've been on the court, we've dropped the tax rate every year. We had a no net revenue rate one year.
You should say that again, Walt.
Well, we drop the tax rate every year, but it's a zero sum gain for some people because, like, for example, in my house, almost every year since I've moved here, I've hit in Texas, there's a statutory cap of 10%, and you can't, you won't pay more than 10%, each
even
year.
if the appraised value goes up
50%.
The tax, the amount of tax can't go up more than 10%.
What I want to ask is, what are your feelings right now, or I guess what is the county doing on the Hayes CAD debacle, where they had access to MLS and ABOR?
Right. Well, so I've done a lot of research on this.
And it was one individual. Apparently.
But here's what I found out.
Allegedly.
I didn't know this. I didn't know this before this. Before a number called on this. The majority of the counties in Texas use MLS data. The fact is that Hayes CAD itself, this is my understanding, uses outside entities to collect various data streams, to look at that. And they were not members of MLS, and they did not, they got that information through a data stream through a provider who was a member, I guess, of MLS.
That's what I understand too.
And so at the end of the day, the use of it was not, it's not illegal. It's actually pretty common in the state. The problem is that whomever actually was a member of the MLS, it appears that they would have violated the usage agreement.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
I'm not sure what ramifications the MLS would have against that user, but I'm sure they're clearly spelled out if you have a subscription to the MLS, what those violations would incur. But again, I don't. In my research, I had no idea that over half the counties in the state used MLS data, but they do.
I actually didn't know that.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah, it's most counties.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because it's a big topic that taxes are going up so much, and Michelle and I talked about it, that they're going up enough that some of our older citizens that are approaching retirement will not be able to afford to live here. What can we do about that?
I would love, we have there are a number of counties in Texas that don't have a tax freeze. at the senior citizen level at 65 or older. We in Hays County do. But again, at the county level, we control, on my tax bill, I think I have 12 or 14 entities on that tax bill. We have one of them, and the county has control over one of them. And we have a freeze for 65 and over.
And that means the freeze means it stops there. It can't go up anymore.
On what portion of the tax bill, though? Because it's not every tax.
Just on the county portion.
Just on the county.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
The only thing we have control over is the county portion of the tax bill.
We can
only set the rate for that.
In Hays County and with Dripping Springs specifically, does it get stopped at 65? Does it get locked at 65?
I don't know if Dripping Springs has the same exemption or the same freeze that we do.
It makes no sense to me why a 75-year-old couple is paying Dripping Springs ISD school taxes.
Yeah.
Well, that's a state issue. I mean, I can tell you that if you've ever actually looked at the formula that the state uses to fund schools,
I'm sure it makes perfect sense.
It's longer than my arm, and there's generally about 5 people who understand it in the state. I'm sure. They have made a very good living off confusing the entire public in the state on how it works and everything.
And that's why all the superintendents are doctors, and they're got all these education trying to understand that stuff. So you guys can't really control anything about, you can lock it at 65, but we're just 3 citizens sitting around. What can we do to help lower the taxes for some of these folks? So
here's what I'll tell you. I think the education when people move here, I think there's a strong misconception out there that, and you as realtors, I'm just telling you, this is something that I run across every day. I had a gentleman call me a couple weeks ago, and he said, I just moved here. I got my tax bill. It's 58% higher than it was last year. Yeah. And I said, what'd you pay for your house?
Yeah.
And he goes, well, I didn't pay what's on tax rolls. I was like, well, I didn't think you'd pay what was on the tax rolls. How much did you pay for the house? Well, he paid about, and it's confidential, but he paid about $10,000 more than what the appraisal was for the house.
Yeah.
I said, so ethically, what's your house worth? He goes, what I paid for it. And I said, so do you want me to fight to get you a lower tax bill when ethically you paid more than that to start with?
Yeah.
And I don't think there's an understanding how that system works. The CAD itself, those employees aren't county employees. They actually answer to the comptroller's office. And there's been counties out there that have tried to freeze appraisals and say, we are not going to allow appraisals to go up. We're going to freeze our rates. We're never going to. And in theory, it works great until the state steps in and says, you're not giving us our portion, and they take over that CAD. And that's happened in the past. And so we have to look at ways that we can identify to try to have an impact. The county has a homestead exemption, right? And there were a lot of people out there, and I think that some of these counties and others, they really gave false hope to those folks that you're talking about when this year they jumped in and they said, we're going to raise the homestead exemption 20 points.
Yeah.
The problem with that is you look at it and say, well, we're going to raise the homestead to $25,000. Your appraisal went up $100,000 this year.
I know.
And so that, when you do that, well, it just means that you're still going to cap out at that 10%.
Yeah.
You're still going to pay the same amount of taxes, but it makes you feel good to say, hey, or makes those elected officials feel good to say, we're doing this.
Right.
But there's no impact. You really want to do that in a year where you have your appraisals don't jump as much, because then it has an actual impact.
I think where people get sideways is, though, the county's growing. There's more people moving here. So there's more people paying into the system. But every year, and I'm not just talking about the county now, we're just sitting here talking. Every year the taxes go up. In the last couple of years, everybody's just gone up 10%.
Our tax bill a month is larger than our mortgage payment a month.
Yeah,
our tax
I believe.
bill.
I believe.
So,
so why, as more people pay into the system, why aren't the taxes going down, or at least stabilizing? Why do they continue to climb so much?
I think
if it's based on a budget, then the budget should be determined, and then the rate should be set, and it shouldn't increase every year.
Well, I agree with that totally. And I think that there's a real misconception out there over what happens when those people move here. Because when someone moves here, when you pay your tax bill in January this year, are you paying that tax for next year? Or are you paying it on this year? You're always paying it a year in arrears, right?
Arrears, right.
And so the county generally, and this is just how the county functions, we generally don't see the full value on a property like that for 28 to 36 months after they get here, or after they decide to move in. You buy a lot, the lot sits there.
Yeah.
You build it. It gets a different assessment. Maybe it sells. And the problem is those folks are here and they need the services of the county. And so whenever they get here, they don't care about, they don't care that maybe their road isn't finished, but you know what? They want to make sure that there's a sheriff's deputy there.
I may be dumbing this down way too much, and I'm just going to say this.
Sure.
Like you look at Arizona and you pay what your value of your car is, right? You're not paying I pay my car registration at $74, right? And you go to Arizona or California where my military son lives,
ridiculous.
And they're paying $300-400 on the value of their car. So I feel like almost our property taxes should be similarly based on what kind of the car registration taxes. It's like, well, I paid $400,000 for my house 16 years ago.
That's the way they used to do it in California, right? With Prop 13, wasn't that what it was? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it was, your taxes were always based on what you paid for.
That's what I think. I mean, and I get it. I mean, you're continuing services. We have more and more people that are moving here, but those people should be paying more.
I'm
paying for
the disconnect I'm having.
Yeah.
Well, but here's the other thing that people don't realize. The county, we've actually dropped our tax rate. Gosh, I would say the vast majority out of it, and whenever I say the vast majority, I mean probably 8 out of the last 9 years or something like that. Our tax rate right now in the county for only that county line item is actually lower than it was in 1991. Hays County is probably in the bottom quarter for tax rates in the entire state.
I hear you.
And so whenever we look at it, we look at the overall tax bill.
But our home values, the average home price right now are $1 million here in Dripping Springs.
Yeah. So to fix the system or address the system, and
burn it down.
Based on what you said,
I think it has to be dismantled. And whenever I say it has to be dismantled, the state itself. The functionality of the tax system in Texas is just broken. And I say that because, the one thing that we have is a mandate, hands down, we have a mandate for education, right? The state shall provide a public education. In that process, 20 years ago, about 70% of that was provided by the state. Now about 70% of that is provided by the local municipality. And so I'm not defending their school district, but what I will say is that statewide, those schools have to figure out a way to pay for something, pay their bills somehow. And so they've done it through property taxes, because really that's the only option they have.
Do you think an income tax is the way to do it?
I don't. I think
that's a slippery slope.
Well, no, I'm just asking.
No, I don't.
Yeah.
What's the solution?
I don't think an income tax is a consumption tax. I think, we have a lot of loopholes in our state tax system, and I say that equal taxation amongst different entities that generally are exempt now. I think it's not necessarily fair for a small business person in a town like Dripping Springs to have to pay taxes on everything.
I know,
and there's some large corporations out there that don't pay anything on some of the enterprises that they have. And there was a time where you needed to incentivize some of those businesses, but I think a lot of them are past. Mm-hmm. What I don't think people realize is that we've been able to drop that tax rate here in Hays County and still provide the services because we've balanced our budget on those new residents that are coming here. I am a big believer in having, somebody pay for their supper before they get here. Right. And so in order to do that, you have to get kind of inventive. I'm looking at one of the things that I'm really excited about that Hays County is really going to be on the forefront of, I think, is a conservation development plan here. It gets to some of the issues that we're talking about. There's not a single county in the state that has a true conservation development plan. And so last year, actually a little bit before last year, Commissioner Lon Shell from the Wimberley and San Marcos area and I sat down and said, we are really concerned about just the encroachment and the sprawl that we're seeing. Is there any way that we can stop that? Not necessarily stop it, but manage it in some way. Because again, like I've expressed, we don't really have some of the tools that other people have. Mm-hmm. And so we commissioned a study, went out and got some experts to look at it. And we put together a program that we hope to roll out Q3, Q4 this year to really, what I would say, incentivize conservation development. And whenever I say that, it would be looking at a piece of property and saying, okay, we as current residents shouldn't have to pay to conserve that property. Whoever that development or that developer is should do it, and the cost or burden of that should go on the residents that live there. Yeah, that are moving into there. Well, how do you do that? We looked at two properties that were one on the east side of 35 and one on the west side that were under direct development pressure, right? All the ranches around them had sold or were developing. Yeah. They were kind of standalone entities. What would it look like if we put a conservation development plan on top of it versus a traditional development plan with half the homes? But how do you make that cash flow for whoever that guy or woman is who's trying to do it? And so we came up with some, what I would consider pretty innovative concepts. And it's more or less, we have 5 real, 5 priority areas: water conservation, wildlife habitat preservation, things like that. And we assign a score to that. If you don't put in a well, you get, there's no wells, you put in a certain amount. You get a certain point. If there is if you're doing rainwater collection, there's certain points relative to that. If your roads are all pervious pavement instead of impervious cover, there's a score to that. If you maintain wildlife habitat, there's a score for that. And you look at that, and the largest, influx of cash that a developer needs whenever they develop something is the influx or the money needed for the infrastructure that they're going to give away. Yeah. And whenever I say give it away, the roads end up in county maintenance. Sure. The water pipe goes to whomever the water supplier is. The sewage lines go to whomever the water. Sure. And so at the end of the day, we look at that and say, okay, how can we incentivize or put something in place for that developer on that property where it won't cost you a penny on the front end? We're not going to pay for it, but we're going to allow you to do a public improvement district or a tax increment reinvestment zone.
Pay for it over time in taxes.
That you can pay for it over time on that specific property. And when it's paid for, you're out. It's no longer a burden on those individual taxpayers that are moving into that area that, again, it would just be on that sole piece of property. But it ensures that half of that property will always be preserved as open space.
Has that been implemented yet, or is it still in the development process?
We finished the report and adopted it in February, which I was pretty excited about, and it's available online through the county. And it's really interesting.
Let's retroactive. I'll pick up a couple neighborhoods and dripping.
Yeah.
If you need some help, call me.
But I'm pretty excited about it because I think we'll be kind of in the forefront in the state. But we're looking at that and how we can really incentivize without using our taxpayer money, how we can incentivize these developments to look at some different ways of doing business.
Yeah, I want to talk about politics. So when you got into government, you weren't really a politician, or were you?
I was a policy wonk. I say that, there's always 2 paths to go when it comes to I'd say politics. One is truly the political side, the campaigning and those kind of things. And then there's the guys who love to look at numbers and figure out problems.
So you were the second guy in your first life.
I was.
When did you become a politician?
You're still the second guy. It sounds like a little bit.
I would still much rather be a policy wonk. Yeah. There's politicians out there who I say live for the campaign trail. They love earning the job or getting the job much more than doing the job. I love doing the job, and election is a necessary evil.
Does that make sense? Is county commissioner the first political job that you had where you'd be the first type?
Elected.
I meant elected. But you know what I mean?
Absolutely. First elected job I've ever had.
And what's it? You guys that do that, I don't know how you do it, because it seems like no matter what decisions you make, there's some percentage of the population that hates what you decided. How do you deal with that?
In the age, I will tell you that I have a lot of conversations, and I say that I have to feel like in the decisions that I make that our general public, or at least our voters out there, have put their trust in me. And a lot of that comes from having direct conversations with them. You know, when I ran the first time, I personally knocked on over 4,000 doors. And I say that because whenever you have a public forum or a debate, or you're at a meeting of a HOA, generally there's going to be 3 to 5 people that overtake that meeting. Their personalities just are going to be dominant in that meeting, right? And you have the vast majority of those folks who are never going to stand up and say what they feel, or they're never going to feel like they're heard. And whenever you're standing on their front doorstep, you're on their territory, and you ask them what they are concerned about, and you really get a true feel for what the issues are and what they feel is most important. And, you know, you might see 10 flyers on one issue in a race, but the fact of the matter is, whenever you're doing door to door and you get a good cross section of the community, you find out what the real issues are.
Yeah.
And a lot of those big, you know, again, we're talking about local stuff, and the folks who don't do the time and due diligence, they want to throw, you know, broad national issues into our local community here. And, you know, you can get elected to Congress by being visceral and standing on these issues and trying to promote a brand.
Right.
Or you can get out and you talk to people and see them at Flores when you go eat lunch, or, you know, when you're doing your chamber meeting once a month, and you know them because they know that you've been involved in the community, and they're not scared to come up and talk to you and tell you exactly how they feel.
Is it hard just to go out to dinner with your family?
Sometimes, but most people are respectful. I can tell you, since I've had this job, I have never had, knock on wood, we're still a small community here.
Yeah.
But I've never had anybody that was overly rude to me or in front of my family or anything like that.
I hope that never happens, but it's happening a little too much.
I've had some heated debates with folks, but at the end of the day, some of the hardest conversations I've had are with some of my best friends. And that's at the end of the day, we're still friends.
Yeah. You know, I rode bikes with this guy for a couple of years, and we were on completely different sides of the political spectrum. And I would always tell him, I want to hear what you have to say, because I don't want to live in my little box. And I may not agree with you, but I still want to hear it. And he could not do the same with me. He finally one day said, I can't ride with you anymore. And I thought, I was really sad about that, because I was open with my views with him, but that's where we need to get back to, right? Is I may not agree with you, and I agree with you on a lot of things, but I may not agree with you, but we should be able to sit down and have a civil conversation and learn from each other.
Well, I think that it's devolved. I jokingly say, they're probably politically incorrect today, but I grew up with Looney Tunes cartoons, right? I loved them. Every Saturday morning, that was the only time cartoons came on. That's what you watched, right? And one of my favorite cartoons was the sheepdog and the wolf, right?
Yeah.
And those guys, you know, they walk up with their lunch pail, they clock in, and they just try to kill each other all day because they believe in what they're doing. And then at the end of the day, they clock out, then they go have dinner together.
That's a great analogy.
Used to at one point, and I view the political system kind of like that. At one point, you had good people that had really bad ideas. And so you sat there and you talked to them about why they had bad ideas. But at the end of the day, they weren't bad people.
Right.
And now I think we've devolved to a place where if I don't agree with you, then you're just a bad person.
And I need to destroy you, which is terrible. Right. Not only do they need to disagree with you, they need to destroy you.
What do you think that is the biggest misconception out there about you, your job, What do you think is the biggest misconception that you're consistently hearing?
Oh, that I somehow control your individual property taxes. I mean, I hear.
I could see that.
Like I get calls, and I think is such a misconception because whenever you write your property tax check every year, you write to Hays County.
I'm not letting you out of this room until you lower my property taxes.
Exactly. Yeah. With my magic wand, right?
Yeah.
But I don't think people understand that. I think when you write that check to Hays County, the money that you give Hays County, all of it except for that one little line that says Hays County, we have to have out out of our system in like 48 hours.
It doesn't say Hays County, care of Walt Smith.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about kind of circling back to your personal life. You got 3 daughters. I guess they're all going to Dripping.
Yeah, I've got one at DSMS, Dripping Springs Middle School. She's going into the 8th grade this year, which is a little scary. And then 2 at Walnut Springs. And all 3 of them went through pathways at the Methodist Church. And then I was joking with the previous principal at Walnut. I think I'll have a longer tenure there than just about anybody I know as a watchdog dad. Because
you wrote that on. What's a watchdog dad?
Oh, you didn't know what a watchdog
I don't know what a watchdog dad is.
So it's a great program. It actually it's a nationwide program, but here in Dripping, it started at Walnut Springs. But they're dads that volunteer at the school, and there are some that are so dedicated. I wish I was those guys. But they open doors every morning for the kids to get out of the cars and those kind of things. What I've done, I've opened doors a couple of times. There are guys that literally are there every day. Wow. They're so dedicated and they're amazing. But like I will do I think for the last 3-4 years. No, she's going to 8th grade since she started elementary school, which is a long time ago. There has been a group of dads that will cook a meal for the watchdog dads volunteer to cook a meal for all of the teachers, like either during in-service or the first week of school. We used to do a fish fry. I took it over a few years ago and I can't fry fish. I just don't trust myself. So I do a huge breakfast. So we'll do, pancakes and bacon and sausage and hash browns and all like that for all the teachers at the school. Cool. And then we volunteer to more or less be a presence in the school. It was started, after some of the incidents a number of years ago. And it's just having a male presence walking around the school that's known. I'll read, generally you can volunteer for a half day or full day. They'll assign you to some of your children's classes. Maybe you're the mystery reader in the library that day, or maybe you're helping different things. But it's a presence in the school. Yeah. But I've spent here, I'm the head of teacher engagement or educator engagement for the Ed Foundation. Yeah. And so all of our teachers here know me as the pancake guy. I think we figured it out. This sounds bad. We figured it out this year at one of our stops. I think between myself and the executive directors and the associate director of the Ed Foundation, I have a huge griddle that we take to all the schools at least once a year. I've done about 6,000 pancakes.
Oh my God.
For all the teachers in the schools. And it's just, we do something every month, right? Just to say thank you.
Yeah.
You wear so many hats and you're constantly go, all the volunteer organizations and just even boards that you're on. And you obviously don't sleep because you told us that at the beginning. But what do you do for fun with your family when all of this political stuff is off the side?
I love to hunt. I love to hunt. And my daughters have really, they're starting to get where they are getting engaged with it. All of them have gone hunting with me. This last year we took them, I got to take them teal hunting a couple of times and they loved it.
What is it?
Teal duck hunting.
Oh, I was going to say, so you're just looking for things that are aqua?
Yeah, exactly. I think my daughters would be very interested in that. Actually, my middle daughter, that is her favorite color, is teal. So
tell them I run the next teal hunt.
Exactly. I have a German short-haired pointer, a hunting dog, and so they love watching him go out and work and those kind of things. And so got him out on they're a little motion sickness when it comes to boats, but we got him out on a airboat earlier this year in March, and did some fishing out of Rockport, and they fell in love with that, which is good. They've cool. But I'd love to do that, and all three of them play a lot of sports, and so my oldest does basketball and volleyball. Shout out to her. They, big rivalry now that we have two middle schools is Sycamore versus DSMS, right? And so, they won they lost in the tournament they didn't lose all year in volleyball. It just B team 7th grade, important stuff. These laughing death decisions, B team volleyball 7th grade. They didn't lose all year, and then they lost in the tournament. Sycamore won the tournament, and then they played Sycamore the next week after the tournament, and they beat them. And so Sycamore won the tournament, I believe, in B team, and they won the district in B team. So, and then the same thing happened in basketball. And so
my brother's a coach over at Sycamore, and my brother was telling me when one of the playoffs was coming up, and he was like, shout out to Coach Book out there. and he was like, oh, we're playing the big game. And I said, what's that? Oh, DSMS. And so trust me, it's on their minds.
I have to say, it's good. Y'all probably know this, but I'm like I said, my oldest plays basketball and volleyball. My middle does basketball and select softball. So I help coach that. And so we're traveling everywhere this year. And then my youngest plays volleyball, and she introduced us to lacrosse this year. Never done lacrosse. Don't know how to do it. Never going to coach it. But I watched it, but I was joking with her when she started. All of her little friends are boys. And it's co-ed. You can play co-ed. And so I said, you really want to do this? She goes, Dad, you can hit people and get to carry a stick. I was like, okay, you convinced me.
Sign me up for lacrosse next week. I'm going to Michelle Old Lady Ball.
Exactly. But I don't know about y'all, but for me, I am kind of concerned with the talk about a second high school and stuff like that. If you travel somewhere like Lake Travis, they've got 10 different mascots for their kids growing up, right? And then they all go to the high school and they're all the same. I look at it and go, man, every single select team, every single travel team, every single league that we had, every one of our kids is a Tiger. Right?
Yeah, that's right.
And so what happens when we get at a second high school? I mean, we are all Tigers.
But you got to look, you haven't lived in this area long enough to look at Westlake and look Westlake's high school is huge. And that was a big discussion there about getting another high school. And I think they need another high school. And what are they? Westlake's probably, I don't know, 10-8.
I know that we're going to grow. Yeah. I know it's going to happen. But I just wonder, there is a unit within our community. There is a true unity around being a Tiger, right? And I know that sounds silly, but I grew up in a town where, you drove an hour to play your football game and everybody was an Eagle, right? And it was a source of pride. Well, here, everybody's a Tiger. So what happens to that when we get a second high school? Because they're not going to be the Tigers.
Tigresses.
The Tigers. Yeah. The Tigerettes. I grew up in high school in Corpus, the Tigerettes.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, Walt, what do you think's next for you?
Oh, just actually surviving 3 children in our school system. I say jokingly, what's next for me is doing a good job in the job I got. I never anticipated having this job, and have a business here locally that I brought with me when I came here, and really enjoy just being in the community. And we chose Dripping Springs really because, I jokingly say my dad always was in a community where he could be involved. He started a couple Lions clubs. He was the chair of the livestock show there, some things like that. And we moved here so that we could be a part of a community. And whether I'm in political office or not, I'm still going to be doing that 20 years from now.
He'll still be making 6,000 pancakes.
Yeah, exactly. I might be flipping them a little slower at that point, but long after this, I'm still going to see everybody at HEB or at the kids' softball game or whatever. And so, really, I think we're and I've said this publicly a number of times, I think we're at a very interesting part in the history of our community.
Yep.
I don't think there's ever been a time where you could pick a 5 to 10 year period where the decisions that are made are going to impact the community more than where we're at right now.
Yeah.
I mean, it will lay the groundwork just
Sure.
because we have such growth going on. It'll really lay the groundwork for the next 50, 100 years. And being a part of the community and all the organizations I've been in, those kind of things, if I wasn't a part of that process, if I just sat back and let it happen and didn't try to have input in it, I'd feel like I kind of shortchanged not only the community, but myself and my family, because I don't want them to go anywhere.
Can we just build a wall around Hays County? Just like
it'd be nice. Not even all of Hays County. If we could just do it over Western Hays County,
just right
maybe
where
we
Nutty
could
Brown
have
is.
Oh,
right
that would be great.
Yeah. When's your next election?
Well, I won a primary election here in March. I have an election in November, and there was no Democrat on the ballot. There is an independent who was certified to be on the ballot a couple of weeks ago, or that's my understanding anyway. And so I'll have a race in November. It'll be the first week in November. If I win that, then I would be in office starting for 4 years, starting in January of 2023. It's a 4-year term. Wrapping up my first 4-year term. I don't know that I'm in this for a lifetime. Never was.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, it does take a tremendous amount of time away from my family.
I'm sure it does.
And so the one thing that, this thing that has bothered me more than anything with the job is just the stress on my family, because it is a commitment that
the whole family had to buy into it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they've been very supportive. And I can't say thank you enough to them for that. But it is, you go to, like I said, I went to about 80 HOA meetings last year. And so, that's a lot of missed practices.
Yeah.
That's a lot of other things. And so, it does wear on your kids,
Yeah.
Well, we appreciate the time that you've carved out for us today.
Thank you for coming in. We wish you best of luck in the fall for your election.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And again, I would encourage anybody, if they have questions about the county or the functionality, or I get calls every day about, hey, I got a pothole in front of my house.
Yeah.
Everything from that to, we got, a loose dog, or who do I talk to at the sheriff's department about this? Or, I'm working through development services on a permit and I don't know where it's at. All those kind of questions are things that I get on a daily basis, and we try to be responsive. If we can't get your answer to you, then we can get you the right person.
That's
so
great.
I would just encourage
I've always
you to reach
found
out.
that anybody at the county is very helpful. You guys do a good job.
We work really hard at hiring employees that understand that their first job is customer service to their customers.
Yeah.
And our citizens of the county are customers.
Yeah.
They're not somebody calling in to complain. They're your customer.
You guys don't act like bureaucrats. That's the big thing. That's that I like. Whenever we call the county for anything, they're very helpful and they get us what we need.
My favorite is Mary Torres.
Yeah.
She's my favorite.
She works in.
I do all my septic site permits with Mary.
Exactly.
We've been working with her for years.
I know she's always
sweet.
Yeah. She's,
well, we're working. That's in our development services department, and in their budget request this year, they have a complete restructure to really have a permitting side and a inspection side and a plan review side, those kind of things.
Because they've been doing it all.
And if there's one department in our county that could stand to grow tremendously, it's development services, because they are just so overwhelmed, and the state has put a shot clock on them. Everything they do, there's a timeline. So
yeah. Well, thanks for coming in, Walt. We really appreciate your time, and good luck in your election. And
all right. Well, thanks for
coming in.
I do appreciate it.
This show is brought to you in part by the Mallett Integrity Team, serving Dripping Springs, Austin, and the surrounding areas of Central Texas since 2004. When you need the best real estate advice and service, give them a call at 512-829-2062 or email them at mallettintegrityteam.com.
Thanks for listening.
if you have comments or feedback, please email us at mallettandmichelle@gmail.com.
follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Mallett and Michelle.
Listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Stitcher.
Please follow us and leave a review.
Thanks again for listening.